Marcus Jefferson slammed his fist on the table and laughed. Right there. In front of the judge, the lawyers, and his soon-to-be ex-wife who sat trembling in her cheap gray dress. He had won. Every cent. Every asset. Every piece of the empire she helped him build. Nina wouldn't get a dime. But just as Marcus turned to embrace his lawyer, the courtroom doors flew open with a sound like thunder. An old man walked in. A man Marcus had dismissed as a nobody. A retired pastor from Chinatown. He was wrong. Dead wrong. And his celebration was about to become his funeral. If you want to see how one man's arrogance destroyed everything he built, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The gavel hadn't touched wood yet, and Marcus Jefferson was already tasting champagne. He leaned back in his chair, letting his platinum Rolex catch the fluorescent light. A small flex, a reminder. To the judge. To the lawyers, and especially to the woman sitting 15 feet away, the woman who used to iron his shirts at 5 a.m. before his investor meetings. Nina Chen Jefferson, his wife of 7 years, soon to be his ex-wife of $0. Relax, Donovan Price whispered beside him. Donovan was Marcus's lawyer. $1,200 an hour, worth every penny. We've got her cornered. The prenup is airtight. Her little breakdown during the deposition last month made her look exactly how we needed. Emotional, unstable, unfit to manage assets. Marcus chuckled low in his throat. I'm not worried, Don. I'm enjoying this. He nodded toward Nina's table. She sat there in a simple gray dress, something off a department store rack. Her dark hair pulled back tight. Her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the whole building on her back. She looked small, defeated, broken. Marcus remembered when he used to dress her in designer gowns. When she was his trophy, his proof that a kid from Southside Chicago could make it all the way to the top. Now she was nothing, and he was everything. Mr. Jefferson, Judge Patricia Santos said from the bench. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Your counsel has filed a motion to dismiss the spousal support request based on evidence of infidelity. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Donovan stood smoothing his $3,000 jacket. We've submitted the documentation. Ms. Jefferson's meetings at the Hotel Marmont are thoroughly recorded. Timestamps, photographs, digital verification. It was a lie. A beautiful, expensive lie. Marcus had paid a private investigator $40,000 to doctor those photos. To create a digital trail that didn't exist. Nina hadn't cheated. In fact, Nina had been painfully loyal. Even while Marcus was spending 3 nights a week with Jade Williams, his 26-year-old marketing coordinator. But truth didn't matter in court. Only evidence mattered, and Marcus could manufacture whatever evidence his checkbook could afford. Nina's lawyer stood up. Sarah Mitchell, a court-appointed public defender who looked like she'd been surviving on coffee and despair. Objection, Your Honor. My client categorically denies these allegations. The photographs are inconclusive. This is a coordinated smear campaign designed to... Ms. Mitchell. Judge Santos raised her hand. The digital forensics have been verified by an independent expert. Unless you have substantial counter-evidence, I'm inclined to accept the documentation as submitted. Nina didn't look up. She was staring at her hands, her fingers twisted around a plain silver ring. Not her wedding ring. She'd taken that off 8 months ago. Marcus leaned toward Donovan. She's not even fighting. It's pathetic. It's over, Donovan whispered back. Watch the judge. Santos shuffled her papers. In light of the submitted evidence and the plaintiff's limited employment history during the marriage, this court is prepared to uphold the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Here it came. Mr. Jefferson will retain full ownership of Jefferson Financial Technologies, the marital residence in Pacific Palisades, and all liquid assets. Ms. Jefferson will receive the severance outlined in the original agreement. $25,000. She will vacate the marital home within 48 hours. $25,000. It wouldn't cover 6 months of rent in this city. Marcus had spent more than that on Jade's apartment deposit. It was perfect. It was poetry. It was exactly what Nina deserved for thinking she could expose him. For finding those files about the offshore accounts. For threatening to tell the IRS. He looked over at her, willing her to meet his eyes. He wanted to see it. The tears. The realization. The understanding that she was nothing without him. She didn't look up. "Is there anything else before I issue the final decree?" Judge Santos asked, glancing at the clock. It was 11:47 a.m., close to lunch. "No, Your Honor," Donovan said smoothly. "Actually," Sarah Mitchell's voice cracked. "We request a continuance. We need additional time to review the financial disclosure documents. There are discrepancies that..." "Denied." Santos didn't even look at her. "You've had 6 months, Ms. Mitchell. I'm ruling today." Marcus tapped his pen on the table. A rhythmic beat of victory. He was already planning the party. Jade was waiting at the Four Seasons. They were flying to Cabo tonight. First class. Champagne at 30,000 feet. The start of his new life. "Very well." The judge raised her gavel. "In the matter of Jefferson versus Jefferson, this court finds in favor of the defendant, Marcus Jefferson. The divorce is granted, and the division of assets..." The doors. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't open. They exploded inward. The sound was so sudden, so violent, that the court reporter gasped. Every head in the room snapped backward. Even Judge Santos froze, her gavel suspended in midair. A man stood in the doorway. He was old, late 60s, maybe early 70s, but he stood like he owned the ground beneath his feet. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, the kind of fabric that absorbed light rather than reflected it. He held a cane in his right hand. Polished black wood with a silver dragon's head handle. He didn't lean on it. He held it like a weapon. But it was his face that stopped Marcus cold. It was a hard face. Carved by decades of difficult decisions. His eyes were dark and flat and utterly without mercy. They swept across the courtroom with the precision of a surgeon examining a tumor. 2 men flanked him, younger. Dark suits, carrying leather briefcases that looked heavier than they should. "Who the hell is that?" Marcus hissed at Donovan. "Security should have stopped him." Donovan didn't answer. Marcus looked at his lawyer and felt the first cold finger of fear trace down his spine. Donovan Price. The man who charged $1,200 an hour to destroy lives had gone completely white. His hands were trembling. "Don. Who is he?" "Quiet." Donovan's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not possible. He's supposed to be retired. He's supposed to be..." "Mr. Chen." Judge Santos spoke from the bench. Her voice had changed. The board authority was gone. In its place was something Marcus had never heard in a courtroom before. Respect and fear. "Reverend Chen, rather," the judge corrected herself. "I wasn't aware you were. I didn't know you had any connection to this case." The old man didn't answer immediately. He walked down the center aisle, his cane making a soft thud against the carpet with each step. Thud, thud, thud. Like a heartbeat. Like a countdown. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the judge. He walked directly to Nina's table and stopped behind her chair. Nina finally looked up, and for the first time all morning, her expression changed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't relief. It was something more complicated. Shame mixed with resignation. Love mixed with regret. She stood slowly. "Hello, Baba." Marcus's jaw dropped. Baba. Father. He knew Nina's father. He'd met the man once 7 years ago at their wedding. A quiet, unassuming Chinese man in a suit that didn't quite fit. He'd said he was a retired pastor from a small church in San Francisco's Chinatown. He'd given a short blessing, eaten his dinner quietly, and left before the cake was cut. Marcus had dismissed him completely. A nobody. A religious man with no money and no connections. completely irrelevant to Marcus's ambitions. But the man standing in the courtroom now was not a retired pastor. He radiated something Marcus recognized, something Marcus himself had spent years trying to project. Power, real power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "Nina." The old man's voice was deep and controlled. It carried to every corner of the room without him raising it at all. "You didn't call me. I wanted to handle it myself." "And how has that gone, my daughter?" He gestured around the room with his cane, taking in Marcus in his expensive suit, Donovan Price with his shaking hands, the judge frozen on her bench. "It appears you are about to be devoured by wolves." He turned his head slightly. His eyes found Marcus for the first time, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since he was 16 years old, hiding in a closet while gang members kicked down his family's front door. Pure, primal terror. "Fortunately," the old man continued, his gaze never leaving Marcus, "the wolves answer to me." Marcus forced himself to speak. He was Marcus Jefferson, damn it. He'd built a $50 million company from nothing. He didn't cower before anyone. "I don't know who you think you are." He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "But this is a closed legal proceeding. You can't just walk in here and—" "Sit down." 2 words, spoken quietly. Marcus sat. He didn't decide to sit. His body simply obeyed, like his legs had suddenly stopped working. Donovan grabbed his arm under the table. "Do you have any idea who that is?" Donovan hissed. "That's William Chen. Reverend Chen now, but 20 years ago he was the most feared federal prosecutor on the West Coast. They called him the Silent Blade. 94% conviction rate. He took down the Morrison crime family. He put 3 congressmen in federal prison. The DOJ still uses his cases as training material." "So he was a prosecutor." Marcus tried to regain his composure. "He's old now. He's retired. He's the man who never loses." Donovan's voice was shaking. "He didn't retire because he wanted to. He retired because his last case cost an FBI agent her life. He blamed himself, found religion, disappeared." Donovan looked at Marcus with something close to pity. If William Chen came out of retirement for this Marcus, if he walked into this courtroom, it means he already knows how it ends. Men like him don't enter a fight, they enter executions. Judge Santos cleared her throat. "Mr. Chen, Reverend Chen, this is highly irregular. You're not listed as counsel of record." "I'm entering an appearance now, Your Honor." William Chen's voice was steady. "On behalf of my daughter, Nina Chen, formerly Nina Jefferson, I'm also introducing new counsel." He gestured to the 2 men behind him. They stepped forward, placing their briefcases on Nina's table with a heavy thunk. One of them leaned over to Sarah Mitchell and whispered something. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the check he pressed into her hand, grabbed her bag, and practically ran from the courtroom. "You can't do this," Marcus shouted. "You can't just swap lawyers in the middle of a verdict." "I can." William Chen didn't even look at him. "And I have. Your Honor, I'm requesting a recess to present new evidence that will fundamentally alter the disposition of this case." Judge Santos glanced at Marcus, then back at William Chen. It wasn't really a choice. 1 hour recess. She banged her gavel. "Court will reconvene at 1 p.m. She practically fled to her chambers. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Marcus turned on Donovan. "What the hell just happened? Who is this guy really? Nina's father is a pastor, a nobody. She told me. She told you what her father wanted you to believe." Donovan was already packing his briefcase. "William Chen doesn't just practice law, Marcus. He dismantles people, legally, financially, professionally. Completely." Donovan looked up at Marcus, and there was no friendship in his eyes, only calculation. "You told me her family was nothing. You told me she came from nowhere. You told me there was no risk." "There isn't. He's an old man. The law is the law. We have the prenup. We have the evidence. He can't change facts." Donovan snapped his briefcase shut. Marcus, men like William Chen don't come into courtrooms to argue facts. They come to reveal truths, and if he's here, it means he already has them. Across the room, Nina was still standing. Her father had his hand on her shoulder. He was speaking to her softly, his head bent close to hers. The two lawyers were unpacking files, thick files, heavy binders that seemed to contain Marcus's entire life. William Chen looked up. His eyes met Marcus's across the room. The old man slowly raised one finger to his lips. Silence. Then he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Marcus had ever seen. No anger. No triumph. Just quiet, absolute certainty. "We need to settle," Donovan said urgently. "Right now. We go over there, we offer her 50%. Maybe he lets you keep the company. Maybe?" 50%, Marcus laughed. It came out high and wrong. "I'm not giving that woman a single dollar more than the prenup says. I built Jefferson Tech, me, from my grandmother's garage, with my own two hands. I came from nothing. I made myself into something. And I'm not letting some old man take it away because his daughter couldn't keep her husband happy." Donovan stared at him for a long moment. "Then you're on your own." He picked up his briefcase. "I represent clients in divorce proceedings. I don't represent them in federal fraud investigations." "Federal fraud, what are you talking about?" But Donovan was already walking away. Marcus stood alone at the defendant's table. The courtroom emptied around him. Staff observers, even the security guard by the door, everyone seemed to find somewhere else to be. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he texted Jade. "Small delay. Family stuff. Nothing serious. Keep the champagne cold." He didn't know that his phone was already compromised. He didn't know that the nothing serious old man had spent the last 48 hours dismantling Marcus's life brick by digital brick. He didn't know that the battle wasn't beginning. It was already over. Marcus was just the last one to find out. The hour recess felt like 5 minutes. When the bailiff called the court back to order, Marcus walked to his table alone. Donovan had texted him a one-line message. "Consider my representation concluded. Find other counsel." Marcus had called 6 lawyers during the break. 3 didn't answer. 2 said they were busy. 1 laughed and hung up. Word traveled fast in the legal community. Whatever William Chen had, whatever he knew, the shark smelled blood in the water. And none of them wanted to be in that water when Chen started feeding. So Marcus sat alone. Across the room, William Chen sat beside his daughter. His 2 associates flanked them like soldiers. Their briefcases were open now, papers organized in neat stacks. They looked like surgeons preparing for an operation. Nina's father was reviewing a file, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked almost gentle now, almost like the quiet pastor Marcus had dismissed 7 years ago. Almost. Judge Santos returned to the bench. She looked like she'd spent the recess making phone calls, learning things, understanding exactly who was sitting in her courtroom. "We're back on the record." Her voice was more careful now, more respectful. "Reverend Chen, you indicated you had new evidence to present." "I do, Your Honor." William Chen stood. He didn't approach the bench. He didn't need to. His voice carried perfectly without amplification. "My client, my daughter, has been accused of infidelity. The defense submitted photographs allegedly proving extramarital conduct at the Hotel Marmont on October 14th. "The evidence was verified," Marcus said loudly. He knew he shouldn't speak. He didn't have a lawyer, but he couldn't stop himself. "Digital forensics confirmed, Mr. Jefferson." William Chen turned to look at him. Just a turn of the head, slow, precise, like a gun turret finding its target. "I spent 20 years questioning witnesses. I know when someone is lying. You are not skilled enough to deceive me." He turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the photographs are fabrications. I have proof." One of his associates stood and handed a thick folder to the bailiff, who carried it to Judge Santos. "Exhibit A." William Chen continued. "A receipt from a gas station in Santa Monica. Time-stamped 8:47 p.m. on October 14th. The same night my daughter was allegedly at a hotel in Hollywood at 8:42 p.m. He let that sink in. The credit card used belongs to Nina. The signature is Nina's. The security footage, which I have included on the flash drive in that folder, shows Nina purchasing bottled water and a protein bar. She was wearing the same gray sweater she'd worn to work that day. Marcus felt sweat breaking out on his forehead. Unless my daughter has mastered teleportation across 17 miles of Los Angeles traffic in 5 minutes, the photographs submitted by Mr. Jefferson are fraudulent. Judge Santos was studying the folder. Her face had gone hard. "Your Honor, I didn't—" Marcus started. "Mr. Jefferson, you don't have counsel present. I advise you to remain silent." "But I—" "Remain silent." Marcus's mouth snapped shut. "There's more, Your Honor," William Chen said. "The private investigator who produced these photographs is named Raymond Kowalski. He's currently sitting in the hallway outside considering his options. When confronted with this evidence, he admitted to accepting an additional payment of $10,000 to, quote, enhance the narrative. The payment came from an account registered to Jefferson Financial Technologies." Santos looked up from the file. Her eyes found Marcus. There was no pity in them. "The account," William Chen continued, "was labeled consulting fees, a curious name for a slush fund used to manufacture evidence of infidelity." This is circumstantial," Marcus shouted. "Anyone could have accessed that account. It doesn't prove I—" "There are emails, Mr. Jefferson." William Chen's voice dropped half an octave. Colder now. Sharper. "Emails from your personal account to Mr. Kowalski instructing him exactly which photographs to create and which timestamps to falsify. Would you like me to read them aloud? Or would you prefer the court simply enter them into evidence?" Silence. Complete devastating silence. Marcus looked at Nina. She was watching him now. Her eyes were clear, calm, not the defeated woman from 2 hours ago. She looked like someone who had been holding her breath for a very long time and had finally let it go. "The allegation of infidelity against my daughter," William Chen said, "is demonstrably false. It constitutes perjury fraud upon this court and malicious prosecution." "Agreed." Judge Santos's voice was iron. "The evidence of Ms. Jefferson's alleged infidelity is stricken from the record. The motion to deny spousal support is denied." Marcus gripped the edge of his table. His knuckles went white. One blow, just one blow, and his perfect case was crumbling. But William Chen wasn't finished. "Since we are discussing infidelity—" "Your Honor." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Perhaps we should examine Mr. Jefferson's activities during the marriage." "Objection!" Marcus shouted, forgetting he had no lawyer to object. "My private life isn't—" "Your private life became court business when you used marital assets to fund it." William Chen signaled his associate. Another file, another stack of evidence. Jade Williams, age 26, marketing coordinator at Jefferson Financial Technologies. He read each item like a prosecutor reading an indictment. A leased Mercedes E-Class signed for by Marcus Jefferson. An apartment in Marina del Rey, rent paid by a shell company called Coastal Consulting LLC, which is wholly owned by Jefferson Financial Technologies. And most recently, a tuition payment to the Fashion Institute of Design, $15,000, paid 2 weeks ago. Marcus couldn't breathe. Jade. He'd promised her he'd be careful. He'd promised her no one would find out. "Your Honor," William Chen continued, "Mr. Jefferson used funds from the joint marital account to finance this relationship. He didn't just commit adultery. He embezzled from his wife to pay for his mistress. According to the prenuptial agreement, he himself drafted paragraph 14, section B, dissipation of marital assets for extramarital purposes renders the separation of property null and void." Judge Santos was already flipping through the prenup. "Mr. Jefferson." She looked up at him. "Did you use the joint account for these expenses?" Marcus's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That money. I put most of that money into the account myself. It was my earnings. It was a joint account. Santos's voice cut like a knife. Legally, it belonged to both of you. You used jointly held marital funds to maintain an extramarital relationship. Mr. Chen is correct. By the terms of your own agreement, the asset protection clauses are voided. She set down the prenup. This court recognizes the dissolution of the prenuptial agreement. We are now proceeding under California's community property statutes. Community property, 50-50, half of everything. Marcus felt the room spinning. No, he still had the company. The company was in a trust. An irrevocable trust. Even Nina's father couldn't touch. There's one more matter, Your Honor. William Chen's voice was almost gentle now, almost kind. The way a doctor sounds when delivering terminal news. The question of Jefferson Financial Technologies. The company is in a trust, Marcus said, his voice desperate now. An irrevocable trust established 3 years ago. It's protected. You can't. I am aware of the trust, Mr. Jefferson. William Chen turned to face him fully. I reviewed it quite carefully. As I reviewed all of your financial documents, your corporate filings, your tax returns, both sets of them. Both sets. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. You see, Your Honor, Mr. Jefferson has been very clever. He established the Jefferson Living Trust to shield his ownership stake from exactly this kind of proceeding. A common strategy. Legal, if executed properly. William Chen picked up his cane and walked slowly toward Marcus's table. But Mr. Jefferson made a mistake. The same mistake arrogant men always make. He assumed no one was paying attention. He assumed the people around him were too ignorant or too powerless to notice what he was doing. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus. 7 years ago, Mr. Jefferson was a young man with a brilliant idea and empty pockets. He needed seed capital. He found an investor, an angel investor who provided $200,000 in exchange for a convertible note. Marcus's hands were trembling. That was an anonymous investor. A venture fund. You never read the documents. William Chen's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire courtroom. You were 24. You were hungry. You signed every piece of paper put in front of you because you wanted the money. You didn't read page 47. He pulled a document from inside his jacket. The convertible note, Mr. Jefferson. It converts to equity under 2 conditions. First, if the company goes public. Second, in the event of dissolution of marriage. The room had gone completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the blood rushing in his ears. Who? His voice cracked. Who was the investor? William Chen smiled. He turned and looked at Nina. Nina, who had been watching this entire time. Nina, who had spent 7 years organizing his life, managing his schedule, smoothing over his insults to investors. Nina, who he'd called nothing. My daughter, William Chen said, came to me 7 years ago. She told me she'd met a brilliant young man, a man with a dream and no resources. She believed in him. She loved him. She asked me to help him. He turned back to Marcus. But she knew your pride would never accept money from her family. So she asked me to invest anonymously, to let you believe you'd earned it on your own merit. Marcus looked at Nina. She met his eyes. There were tears on her cheeks, but she didn't look away. I agreed, William Chen continued, on one condition. My lawyers drafted the convertible note. If the marriage remained intact, the investment was a gift. But if the marriage was ever dissolved... He paused. The debt comes due, with interest, and equity. He raised the document higher. Based on the current valuation of Jefferson Financial Technologies and the terms of the convertible note, which activated the moment you filed for divorce, my daughter doesn't just own half the marital assets, Mr. Jefferson. The pause stretched into eternity. Nina owns 62% of Jefferson Financial Technologies. She is the majority shareholder. She controls the board. She decides the company's direction. He lowered the document. She is your boss, Mr. Jefferson. She owns you." Marcus sat frozen. The words weren't processing. They couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "No." The word came out as a whisper. "No. That's not possible. This is fraud. This is entrapment. I'll sue. You'll do nothing." William Chen's voice hardened. "Because as of 8 a.m. this morning, I filed a federal motion to freeze all your personal and corporate accounts pending investigation of tax evasion, securities fraud, and money laundering." He raised his cane and pointed it at Marcus like a sword. "I found your other books, Mr. Jefferson. The ones for the Cayman Islands accounts. The ones showing how you funneled $6 million in company profits to avoid United States taxes." Marcus looked wildly around the courtroom, looking for help, looking for an exit, looking for anyone who might save him. There was no one. Donovan Price was gone. The security guards watched impassively. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, staring at the scene with wide eyes. "The FBI is currently executing a search warrant at Jefferson Financial Headquarters." William Chen continued. "Your servers are being seized. Your employees are being interviewed. Your IT director, Mr. Kevin Okonkwo, has been extremely cooperative." Kevin. The man Marcus had underpaid for years. The man whose algorithms Marcus had taken credit for. The man Marcus had called the diversity hire behind his back. "Kevin sends his regards," William Chen said. He was very grateful when Nina offered him a 3% equity stake in exchange for his assistance. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think. He looked at Nina one last time. She stood up from her chair. 7 years of silence. 7 years of being overlooked, undervalued, dismissed. "I knew about Jade Marcus." Her voice was steady, clear. "I knew about her for months. I saw the credit card statements. I found the hotel receipts in your jacket." She walked toward him slowly. "I didn't say anything because I kept hoping. I kept thinking if I just tried a little harder, if I was just a little better, you'd come back to me. You'd remember why you fell in love with me." She stopped in front of his table. "But you didn't fall in love with me, did you? You fell in love with what I could do for you. The contacts I could make, the schedules I could manage, the image I could help you project." She shook her head. "I was never your wife, Marcus. I was your employee, and now..." She looked at her father, then back at Marcus. "Now you're mine." She turned and walked back to her table. Judge Santos banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned pending the results of the federal investigation. Mr. Jefferson, I strongly advise you to retain new counsel immediately. You're going to need it." She stood and disappeared into her chambers. Marcus sat alone at the defendant's table. The courtroom emptied around him. The lawyers gathered their files. The bailiffs opened the doors. The spectators filed out, already tapping on their phones, spreading the story. William Chen walked past Marcus without a glance. Nina followed her father, her head high, her steps steady. At the doorway, she paused. She looked back at Marcus one last time. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction, just a quiet, profound sadness. "I really did love you, Marcus," she said softly. "I just wish you'd loved me back." She walked out. The doors swung shut behind her. Marcus sat in the empty courtroom, surrounded by the wreckage of his life, listening to the echo of his own destruction. And somewhere in the distance, he could have sworn he heard champagne glasses breaking. The double doors of the courthouse slammed open, and Marcus Jefferson stumbled into the blinding Los Angeles sun. His legs weren't working right. His lungs weren't pulling air right. Everything felt wrong, tilted like the whole world had shifted 3 degrees to the left and forgotten to tell him. He fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped it twice on the concrete steps. The screen cracked. He didn't care. He needed Jade. He needed someone to tell him this was all a nightmare, that he'd wake up and everything would be fine. He dialed her number. "Hey, babe." Jade's voice was sharp. Not the honey-sweet tone she used when she wanted something. This was different. This was cold. "Jade, listen to me." Marcus was gasping, loosening his tie with one hand. "Something happened in court, a glitch, some legal technicality. My father-in-law showed up and, I know. 2 words. Flat as a frozen lake." "What do you mean you know?" "TMZ Marcus. It's everywhere. Tech mogul Marcus Jefferson faces federal investigation. They're saying you committed tax fraud. They're saying your wife owns your company now." "That's not it's complicated, okay? Just listen, I need you to pack a bag. We'll go to the cabin in Tahoe, just for a week. Let this blow over. Then I'll fix it. I'll fix everything." Silence on the other end. "Jade, baby." "I'm at Neiman's Marcus." "What?" "I'm at Neiman Marcus. I was buying a dress for Cabo. Remember Cabo?" "The trip you promised me. We can still go. Just give me a few days to—" "My card got declined." Marcus closed his eyes. "The black card, Marcus. The one you gave me. The one you said had no limit. It got declined in front of everyone. In front of the sales girl who's been helping me for 6 months. Do you know how embarrassing that was? It's a freeze, just temporary. My accounts are—" "I called the bank." Jade's voice had turned to ice. "They didn't say frozen, Marcus. They said closed. By the primary account holder." "Nina." Nina had already moved. "That's impossible. She can't—" "She did. And you know what else your assistant called me? Your former assistant, I should say. Victoria. She told me security is packing up your office right now. They're putting your stuff in boxes, Marcus, cardboard boxes, like you're some nobody they're firing. Jade, please, I need you right now. You need me." She laughed, a cruel, brittle sound. "What exactly do you have left for me to need, Marcus?" "Your looks. You're pushing 40 and you stress eat. Your charm that only works when there's a checkbook behind it. Your company, your wife owns that now. Your reputation. It's currently trending on Twitter under #TechBroDownfall." Marcus felt like he'd been shot. Each word was a bullet. "We had something real, Jade. These 2 years were an investment, Marcus, and you just crashed to zero." Click. She hung up. Marcus stared at his phone. The cracked screen showed her name disappearing. 2 years. 2 years of gifts. The car, the apartment, the jewelry, the promises. Gone in 30 seconds. He wanted to sit down on the courthouse steps and never get up. He wanted to disappear into the concrete. He wanted to wake up 10 years ago and make different choices. But he couldn't do any of those things, because there was still one chance, one slim, desperate chance. The servers, the physical hard drives in his office, the backup files with his shadow ledger, the real numbers showing every wire transfer to the Caymans, every falsified tax return, every dollar he'd hidden from the IRS. If the FBI got those drives, Marcus wasn't just losing his company. He was going to federal prison for 20 years. He had to destroy them. Marcus spotted a taxi idling at the curb. He threw himself into the back seat. "Century City, Jefferson Tower, fast. I'll give you 200 if you get there in 10 minutes. The driver looked at him in the rearview mirror, saw the sweat, the wild eyes, the expensive suit that was suddenly too big for the man wearing it. "You got it, boss." The cab lurched into traffic. Marcus pulled out his phone and tried to log into his company admin account. His fingers were slick with sweat, typing the password wrong twice before he got it right. "Access denied. User account suspended." "No." He tried again. "Access denied. User account suspended." No, no, no. He was the admin. He built the system. He wrote the code that made this company worth $50 million. How was he locked out of his own building, Kevin? The name hit him like a punch. Kevin Okonkwo, his IT director. The man Marcus had hired 6 years ago, fresh out of Howard. The man Marcus had paid $60,000 a year to do work worth 3 times that. The man Marcus had called The diversity hire, in board meetings, laughing with the other executives while Kevin sat 3 chairs away pretending not to hear. Kevin had flipped. Kevin had the keys to the kingdom, and Kevin had just given them to Nina. The cab screeched to a halt in front of Jefferson Tower. The glass spire gleamed in the afternoon sun, 40 stories of Marcus's ambition reaching toward the sky. His name was on that building. His vision. His sacrifice. His 18-hour days and missed holidays and broken relationships. All of it. About to be taken away. Marcus threw cash at the driver and scrambled out. He pushed through the revolving doors, already composing what he'd say to security. Just needed to grab some personal items. Medical emergency. Heart medication in his desk. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. The receptionist, Sarah, the girl he'd hired because she had a nice smile, looked up as he entered. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed her phone and whispered something urgent. "Mr. Jefferson." The voice came from his left. Marcus turned. 2 men in dark suits. Not security guards. Security guards didn't wear suits that expensive. Security guards didn't have earpieces. Security guards didn't stand with their feet planted and their hands clasped in front of them like they were ready to take a bullet. "I'm in a hurry." Marcus tried to push past them. "I just need to get to my office." The larger one stepped in front of him, a wall of muscle in Armani. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir." "Not possible. Do you know who I am? I own this building. I built this company from nothing. You were the owner, sir." The man's voice was polite but firm. "As of 1 hour ago, the board of directors has placed you on administrative leave. Your access credentials have been revoked." "The board?" Marcus laughed, a high, desperate sound. "I am the board. Those men are my golf buddies. We've been drinking scotch together for 5 years. Call Richard Morrison. Call Steve Huang. They'll tell you this is all a mistake." "Mr. Morrison resigned from the board 45 minutes ago, sir. Mr. Huang resigned 30 minutes after that. The remaining members voted unanimously to suspend your access pending a full investigation." Marcus felt the floor tilting beneath him. They'd all jumped ship. Every single one of them. The men who'd laughed at his jokes, accepted his gifts, promised loyalty over expensive dinners. Gone in less than an hour. "Kevin!" Marcus shouted toward the elevators. "Kevin Okonkwo, I know you're up there, you backstabbing son of a—" "Mr. Jefferson." The security man's hand was on Marcus's chest now. Firm. Immovable. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "I'm not leaving. This is my building, my company." "You can't just—" "Actually, we can." The voice came from above. Marcus looked up. Kevin Okonkwo was leaning over the mezzanine railing, 6 years of suppressed fury burning in his eyes. "You know what's funny, Marcus? All those times you took credit for my encryption algorithms. All those investor meetings where you showed off my code like you'd written it yourself. All those performance reviews where you told me I was lucky to have this opportunity. I kept quiet. I smiled. I said, 'Thank you, sir,' because I needed the job. Because I had student loans. Because I thought maybe if I was patient, things would get better." Kevin's hands tightened on the railing. "They didn't get better. But you know what did? My relationship with Nina. She was the only person in this company who ever asked about my family, who remembered my mother's birthday, who treated me like a human being instead of a line item on a diversity report." He leaned forward. "She called me this morning, Marcus, before the court hearing even started. She offered me 3% equity to secure the servers. You know what I said? I said I'd do it for free, just to see your face. You're finished, Kevin." Marcus's voice was shaking with rage. "When I get out of this, I'll make sure you never work in tech again. I'll destroy your reputation. You'll do nothing." Kevin's smile was cold. "Because in about 15 minutes, the FBI is going to walk through those doors, and they're going to find every file you thought was deleted, every transaction you thought was hidden, every lie you ever told." Kevin straightened up. "Enjoy prison, Marcus. I hear the Wi-Fi is terrible." He turned and walked away from the railing. Marcus lunged toward the elevators, but the security guards caught him. 2 men, 4 hands holding him back like he was nothing, like he was nobody. "Let me go! Let me, Mr. Jefferson!" A new voice, sharp, commanding. Marcus went still. He knew that voice. William Chen walked through the revolving doors like he owned the building, which Marcus realized with a sickening lurch he probably did now. But it wasn't just William Chen. Behind him walked Nina, and behind Nina walked 6 people in navy blue windbreakers, yellow letters on the back, FBI. Marcus stopped struggling. The fight went out of him all at once like air rushing from a punctured tire. "Hello, Marcus." Nina's voice was calm, almost sad. "I really didn't want it to end this way." "Liar." The word came out as a croak. "You've been planning this for months. You and your father. This was all a setup. The marriage, the investment, all of it." "No, Marcus." Nina shook her head. "The marriage was real. The love was real. I gave you 7 years. I gave you my youth, my career, my family's money. I believed in you when nobody else did." She took a step closer. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day? You held my hands and you said, 'I'm going to make you proud to be a Jefferson.' I believed you, Marcus. I believed every word." Her eyes were glistening, but her voice didn't waver. "When did that man die? When did you become this person who cheats and steals and lies? Was it the first million? The first investor? The first time someone called you a genius? Nina, please." "I mourned you, Marcus. Long before this divorce, I mourned the man I married, because he was gone. Maybe he was never real. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see." She stepped back. "But I'm done mourning now." She looked at the FBI agents. "He's all yours." The lead agent stepped forward, a woman with short gray hair and glasses that reflected the lobby lights. "Marcus Jefferson, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of tax evasion, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Marcus heard the words like they were coming from underwater, distant, muffled, unreal. The agent kept talking. Rights, lawyers, courts. None of it mattered. He was watching Nina, watching her stand next to her father, watching her transform from the broken woman in the courtroom to something else entirely, something stronger, something he'd never noticed in 7 years of marriage, because he'd never looked. He'd never really looked at her. "Nina," his voice broke. "Please, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can—" "No, Marcus." Nina's voice was gentle, almost kind. "We can't. Because there is no we. There hasn't been for a long time." She turned to her father. "Let's go, Baba. I have a company to run." They walked toward the elevators. William Chen pressed the call button. The doors opened immediately. Marcus watched them step inside. Watched Nina take her place in the elevator that used to carry him to his corner office. Watched the doors begin to close. At the last second, Nina looked back. "Goodbye, Marcus." The doors slid shut. And Marcus Jefferson, who had woken up that morning as a $50 million tech mogul, felt the cold steel of handcuffs close around his wrists. The FBI agent turned him around, started walking him toward the doors. Through the glass, Marcus could see news vans pulling up, cameras being shouldered, reporters adjusting their microphones. His humiliation was about to go national. "Wait." Marcus tried to stop, but the agent kept pushing him forward. "Wait. I need to make a phone call. I have rights. I need to call my lawyer." "You can make your call at the field office." "But—" The doors opened. The light hit him like a physical blow. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted. A chaos of questions bombarding him from every direction. Mr. Jefferson, is it true you stole millions from your own company? Marcus, did your wife really own your business this whole time? How do you respond to allegations that you faked evidence against your wife? The agent guided him toward a black SUV with tinted windows. The crowd pressed closer. Someone shoved a microphone in his face. Marcus Jefferson. Any comment for the American people? Marcus opened his mouth. No words came out. What could he possibly say? What excuse could he offer? What spin could he put on complete and total destruction? He was pushed into the back of the SUV. The door slammed shut. The noise of the crowd became muffled, distant, like it was happening in another universe. The car started moving. Through the tinted windows, Marcus watched Jefferson Tower grow smaller in the distance. His name was still on that building. His name that he'd worked so hard to make mean something. It would probably come down by tomorrow. He slumped against the seat. His hands were cuffed behind his back. His suit was wrinkled. His tie was crooked. His platinum Rolex had been removed as evidence. This morning, he'd had everything. Now he had nothing. Not his company. Not his money. Not his mistress. Not his freedom. And in the back of his mind, louder than the sirens, louder than the shouting reporters, louder than the FBI agent reading him his rights, one question kept echoing. How? How had the quiet woman in the gray dress destroyed him so completely? How had the nobody father from Chinatown turned out to be the most dangerous man Marcus had ever met? How had he been so blind? The answer came to him slowly, painfully, like a wound being cleaned. He'd underestimated them. He'd looked at Nina and seen a convenient wife, a trophy, an assistant who shared his bed. He'd looked at William Chen and seen a retired pastor, an old man, a nobody. He'd never bothered to look deeper, never bothered to wonder if there was more beneath the surface, never bothered to treat them like threats because he didn't think they were capable of threatening him. He was Marcus Jefferson, South Side Chicago to Silicon Beach. A success story, a genius, a self-made man. Who could touch him? The answer, it turned out, was everyone he'd stepped on climbing to the top. Kevin, who'd endured years of disrespect. The board members who'd been looking for an excuse to distance themselves. The investors who cared more about returns than loyalty. And Nina. Nina, who'd given him everything. Who'd loved him when he had nothing. Who'd built him up piece by piece, only to watch him become someone she didn't recognize. Nina, who'd been planning her exit for longer than Marcus wanted to admit. The SUV pulled into an underground garage, the FBI field office. Gray concrete and fluorescent lights. Marcus was pulled from the car. Processed through security. Photographed. Fingerprinted. Stripped of his belt and shoelaces like a common criminal. Because that's what he was now, a common criminal. They put him in an interrogation room. White walls, metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. He sat alone for what felt like hours. His mind kept circling back to Nina, to her face in the courtroom when her father walked in, to the way she'd stood up at the end, her spine straight, her voice clear. I was never your wife, Marcus. I was your employee. And now you're mine. She'd beaten him. Not with lawyers or money or connections, though she'd used all of those. She'd beaten him with patience. 7 years of patience. 7 years of watching. 7 years of waiting for him to make the mistake that would justify everything that came next. And he'd made it. He'd filed for divorce. He'd triggered the convertible note. He'd activated the weapon that had been sitting dormant in a filing cabinet since the day they got married. He'd destroyed himself. Nina had just handed him the matches. The door to the interrogation room opened. Agent Morrison, the woman with the gray hair and glasses, walked in, followed by a younger man carrying a thick folder. She sat down across from Marcus. Mr. Jefferson, I'm going to give you one chance to make this easier on yourself. Marcus looked at her. I want a lawyer. You're entitled to one. But before you make that call, you should know what we have. She opened the folder. 6 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands containing approximately $12 million in undeclared income. Wire transfers to shell companies in Delaware designed to obscure ownership. Falsified tax returns for the past 4 fiscal years. And my personal favorite. She pulled out a photograph. Evidence of witness tampering. You paid Raymond Kowalski to fabricate photographs of your wife. That's obstruction of justice. That's another 10 years. She closed the folder. So, you can lawyer up and fight this for the next decade. You'll lose. We have everything. Your IT director has been very cooperative. Or, she leaned forward. You can help yourself. Tell us about the other investors who've been using your company to launder money. Give us names. Give us accounts. Give us something we can use. Marcus stared at her. Other investors. She was talking about the Koreans, the Russians, the unnamed accounts that had pumped money into Jefferson Tech's Series B without asking many questions. Marcus had always wondered where that money came from. He'd just been too greedy to care. If I cooperate, reduced sentence, maybe 15 years instead of 30, maybe a minimum security facility with tennis courts instead of Lompoc. 15 years. He'd be 53 when he got out, broke, forgotten. A cautionary tale they'd tell at business school. The future stretched out before him like a gray highway leading nowhere. I need to think. You have 24 hours. Agent Morrison stood up. After that, the deal's off the table. She walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. Marcus sat alone in the interrogation room. And for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Jefferson, tech mogul, self-made man, master of the universe, put his head in his hands and wept. Not for what he'd lost, for what he'd become. The hours in that interrogation room stretched like taffy. Marcus had stopped crying. His eyes were dry now, gritty like someone had poured sand under his lids. He'd been given water that tasted like metal and a bathroom break supervised by a guard who looked at him like he was something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. His lawyer finally showed up around 9 p.m. Not Donovan Price. Donovan was gone like everyone else. This was Theodore Marsh, a public defender with tired eyes and a briefcase held together with duct tape. Mr. Jefferson. Theodore sat down across from him. I've reviewed your case. And Theodore opened his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. And you're looking at 25 to 30 years if this goes to trial. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Agent Morrison said 15 if I cooperate. Agent Morrison wants you to flip on the foreign investors. That's why she's dangling a reduced sentence. Theodore looked at him over his reading glasses. But here's the thing, Mr. Jefferson. Those foreign investors, they don't take kindly to being ratted out. You give the FBI names, and you might not survive long enough to serve your sentence. You're saying I'm dead either way. I'm saying you need to be smart about this. Theodore leaned back. The FBI doesn't just want names. They want evidence, documentation, recordings, things you don't have. They're fishing, hoping you'll panic and give them something useful. So what do? You take the deal. 15 years. Keep your mouth shut about the foreign money. Do your time quietly. With good behavior, you're out in 10. 10 years. A decade in a cell. Marcus thought about his penthouse in Pacific Palisades, his collection of rare whiskeys, his Tesla in the garage, his closet full of Italian suits, all of it gone. And Nina. Nina would be running his company, living his life, spending his money, while he rotted in a concrete box. There has to be another way. Marcus's voice cracked. There has to be something, some loophole, some technicality. You're a lawyer. Find something. Theodore looked at him with something close to pity. Mr. Jefferson, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've represented murderers, drug dealers, embezzlers, and worse. You know what they all have in common. They all think there's a way out. A trick, an angle, a secret door that only the clever ones can find. He closed his notepad. There isn't. The law is a machine. Once you're inside it, it grinds you up. Slowly. Methodically. Without mercy. The only thing you can control is how much you lose in the process. Marcus stared at the table. The metal surface was scratched with decades of desperate fingernails. Other men had sat in this chair. Other men had faced this moment. Other men had probably asked the same questions, hoping for different answers. "I'll take the deal." Theodore nodded. "I'll inform the prosecutors." He stood up, gathered his papers. "Mr. Jefferson, one more thing." Marcus looked up. "Your wife's lawyers have filed for an emergency asset freeze. Everything that wasn't already seized by the FBI is now being held pending the divorce settlement. That includes your personal accounts, your vehicles, your art collection, everything." "Of course it does." Theodore paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of men in your position. Most of them are bitter, angry. They spend their whole sentence plotting revenge, thinking about all the people who wronged them." He adjusted his glasses. "The smart ones are different. They use the time. They figure out what went wrong. They come out the other side as better men. I hope you're one of the smart ones." He walked out. The door closed, and Marcus Jefferson was alone again. The transfer to federal holding happened at 3 a.m. They put him in an orange jumpsuit. They put him in a van with metal benches and no windows. They drove him to the Metropolitan Detention Center, a gray fortress of concrete and razor wire. The processing took hours. Strip search, medical check, psychological evaluation. They asked him if he was suicidal. They asked him if he had any gang affiliations. They asked him if he understood that violence against other inmates or staff would result in additional charges. Marcus answered everything in a monotone. "Yes. No. I understand." They gave him a cell. 6 feet by 8 feet. A metal bunk, a metal toilet, and a metal sink. A small window near the ceiling showed a rectangle of gray sky. His cellmate was a man named Jerome. 50s, heavy-set, doing time for wire fraud. "New fish." Jerome looked him up and down. "What are you in for?" "Tax evasion, securities fraud." Jerome whistled low. "White collar. You're gonna be popular in here. These gangbangers love taking money from rich boys." Marcus said nothing. He climbed onto the top bunk. He stared at the ceiling. This was his life now. This cell, this jumpsuit, this rectangle of gray sky that was all he'd see of the outside world for the next decade. He thought about his mother. Mama Rose, still alive, living in that same house in Southside Chicago. The house Marcus had offered to buy her out of 100 times. She'd always refused. "This is my home, baby," she'd say. "Your father and I built a life here. I'm not leaving." His father, dead when Marcus was 16. Heart attack on the factory floor. No insurance, no pension. Just a widow with 2 sons and a mortgage she couldn't afford. Marcus had sworn at the funeral that he'd never be poor again, that he'd make enough money to protect everyone he loved, that he'd be somebody, and he had. He'd made it. He'd built Jefferson Tech from nothing. He'd become the success story everyone talked about, the kid from the South Side who beat the odds. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten why he started. He'd forgotten that the money was supposed to mean freedom, not power. He'd forgotten that success was supposed to be shared, not hoarded. He'd forgotten that the people who helped him up deserved better than to be stepped on. And now here he was, top bunk in a federal detention center, charged with crimes he absolutely committed, about to lose everything he'd spent 20 years building. His mother would find out tomorrow. It would be in all the papers. She'd always been proud of him, bragged about him to the neighbors, kept newspaper clippings in a scrapbook. What would she put in the scrapbook now? Marcus closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come. The morning brought news. Jerome shook him awake at 6 a.m. "Hey, rich boy, you're gonna want to see this." Marcus climbed down from the bunk. Jerome was pointing at a small television bolted to the wall outside their cell, the common area. A dozen inmates gathered around watching the morning news. On screen, a reporter stood in front of Jefferson Tower. Behind her, workers on cherry pickers were removing the giant letters from the building's facade. Jefferson. They were taking down his name. And in a stunning development, Nina Jefferson, formerly known as Nina Chen, has announced a complete rebranding of the company. The building will now be known as Phoenix Tower, and the company will operate under the name Phoenix Financial Technologies. In a press conference this morning, Ms. Jefferson addressed the changes. The screen cut to Nina. She stood at a podium surrounded by reporters. She wore a white blazer. Her hair was down. She looked confident, strong, nothing like the woman in the gray dress from the courtroom. Over the past 7 years, this company lost its way. It prioritized profit over people. It valued reputation over integrity. That ends today. Ms. Jefferson, a reporter shouted, do you have any message for your ex-husband? Nina paused. She looked directly into the camera. Marcus felt like she was looking directly at him. I hope Marcus uses this time to become the man I thought he was when I married him. I hope he finds whatever he lost along the way. But that's his journey now, not mine. I have a company to rebuild and employees who deserve better than what they got. That's where my focus is. The press conference ended. The news moved on to other stories. The inmates around the television dispersed, glancing at Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. That's cold, Jerome whistled. She's already moved on. Not even a thank you for building the damn thing. Marcus said nothing. He walked back to his cell. He climbed onto his bunk. He stared at the ceiling. Nina was right. It was his journey now. His alone. And for the first time since his father's funeral, Marcus Jefferson had absolutely no idea where the road was going to lead. 3 weeks into his stay at the Metropolitan Detention Center, Marcus Jefferson got a visitor he never expected. The guard came to his cell at 2 p.m. Jefferson, you got someone in visitation. Marcus looked up from his bunk. He hadn't had a single visitor since he'd arrived. Not his mother, he'd asked her not to come, couldn't bear to see her face through the glass. Not his so-called friends, they'd all vanished like smoke. Not even his public defender, who communicated through letters and brief phone calls. Who is it? Some old guy. Says he's family. Marcus's blood went cold. William Chen. He thought about refusing, thought about telling the guard to send the old man away. But something stopped him. Curiosity, maybe. Or masochism. Or just the desperate need to understand how he'd been so thoroughly destroyed. He followed the guard to the visitation room. William Chen sat on the other side of the plexiglass partition. He looked exactly as he had in the courtroom. Impeccable suit, hard eyes, the silver dragon's head cane resting against the ledge beside him. Marcus sat down slowly. He picked up the phone receiver. William Chen did the same. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You came to gloat. Marcus's voice was hoarse. He hadn't talked much in 3 weeks. Get it over with. I don't gloat, Marcus. William Chen's voice was calm, measured. Gloating is for small men who need validation. I came to verify. Verify what? That justice was served. The old man's eyes swept over Marcus. The orange jumpsuit, the stubble, the hollow cheeks. It appears it was. Marcus felt a surge of anger. Justice. You call this justice. You destroyed my life. You took everything from me. I took nothing from you, Marcus. I simply revealed what was already true. You built your empire on lies, on fraud, on the broken backs of people you considered beneath you. All I did was turn on the lights. You set me up. The convertible note, the investment. You planned this from the beginning. William Chen shook his head slowly. No. I planned for contingencies. There's a difference. He leaned back slightly. When Nina came to me 7 years ago, she was in love. Genuinely, deeply in love. She saw something in you that I didn't. A spark. A potential. She believed you would become a great man. His jaw tightened. I hoped she was right. I wanted her to be right. But I've spent 40 years watching people, Marcus, studying them, learning to see beneath the surface. And when I met you, I saw the hunger in your eyes. Not hunger for success, hunger for power, hunger for control, the kind of hunger that consumes everything it touches. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. So you invested in my company just to have leverage over me. I invested in my daughter's happiness. The leverage was insurance. William Chen's voice hardened. And I didn't cash in that insurance for 7 years, Marcus. 7 years. Do you know how many times Nina called me crying? How many times she made excuses for your behavior? How many times I wanted to tear you apart with my bare hands? The old man's composure cracked for just a moment. Something raw and primal flickered in his eyes. She begged me to stay out of it. She said you were going through a phase. She said the pressure of building the company was changing you. She said the real Marcus was still in there somewhere. He shook his head. I waited. Against every instinct I had, I waited. Because my daughter asked me to. Because I loved her more than I hated you. Marcus swallowed hard. Then why now? Why show up in that courtroom? Because you filed for divorce, Marcus. You, not Nina. You decided to throw away the one person who ever truly loved you. And then you tried to destroy her. You manufactured evidence. You called her unstable. You were going to leave her with nothing while you flew off to Cabo with your mistress. William Chen leaned forward. That's when I stopped waiting. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but what could he say? Everything the old man said was true, every single word. What do you want from me? Marcus asked finally. An apology. Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt Nina. I'm sorry I cheated. I'm sorry I lied. There. Is that what you came for? No. Then what? William Chen was quiet for a long moment. I came to tell you something, Marcus. Something I learned a long time ago when I was young and angry, and thought I could fight the whole world by myself. He adjusted his grip on the phone. 30 years ago, I was the most feared prosecutor on the West Coast. 94% conviction rate. They called me the silent blade because I never raised my voice in court. I didn't need to. I let the evidence speak. I let the truth do my shouting for me. His eyes grew distant. And then I made a mistake. My last case. A major trafficking operation. I got cocky. I pushed too hard, too fast. I didn't wait for backup. And a young FBI agent, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation, she paid the price for my arrogance. Marcus saw something shift in the old man's face. Pain. Real pain. She was 28 years old. She had a husband and a little boy. And she died because I was too proud to ask for help. Too certain that I knew better than everyone else. William Chen looked directly at Marcus. I quit the day after her funeral. I couldn't look at another case file. Couldn't walk into another courtroom. I found a small church in Chinatown, and I spent the next decade trying to understand why God would let someone so good die for my sins. You're saying I remind you of yourself. I'm saying arrogance has a cost, Marcus, and you never know how high that cost is until someone else pays it. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. A wall he'd built years ago. A wall that kept him from feeling the weight of his own choices. Nina paid the cost for mine. Yes. William Chen nodded slowly. She did. For 7 years she paid. But here's the thing about my daughter, Marcus. She's stronger than you ever realized. She's stronger than I realized. And now she's free. He paused. The question is whether you'll use this time to become free as well. Marcus stared at the old man through the glass. Free, I'm looking at 15 years in federal prison. How is that free? Freedom isn't about where you are. It's about who you are. William Chen stood up slowly, reaching for his cane. I've met men who were free inside these walls, and I've met men who were prisoners in penthouse apartments. The difference isn't the bars, it's the soul. He looked down at Marcus one last time. You have a choice to make, Marcus Jefferson. You can spend the next 15 years being angry, bitter, plotting revenge, blaming everyone but yourself. Or you can use this time to find the man you were supposed to be, the man Nina believed in, the man your mother raised. He turned toward the door. William. Marcus's voice stopped him. The old man looked back. Does she ever ask about me? William Chen was quiet for a moment. No, Marcus, she doesn't. He walked out without looking back. Marcus sat alone in the visitation room for a long time after that. The guard eventually came to take him back to his cell, but Marcus barely noticed. His mind was spinning, churning, processing everything the old man had said. Freedom isn't about where you are. It's about who you are. He'd spent his whole life chasing external freedom. Money, power, status. The ability to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, to whoever he wanted. And where had it gotten him? A 6x8 cell with a metal toilet and a rectangle of gray sky. Jerome was waiting when Marcus got back to the cell. You look like you've seen a ghost, rich boy. Maybe I did. Marcus climbed onto his bunk. He stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling he'd been staring at for 3 weeks. But something was different now. Something had shifted. The next morning, Marcus requested paper and a pen. The guard looked at him like he was crazy. What for? I want to write a letter. To who? Marcus paused. He thought about his mother, thought about Nina, thought about all the people he'd hurt over the years. To myself. The guard shrugged and brought him the supplies. Marcus sat on his bunk with the blank paper in front of him. He didn't know where to start. He'd never been good with words, not real words, not the kind that came from the heart. He'd always used words as weapons, as tools, as ways to manipulate and control. He put the pen to the paper. My name is Marcus Jefferson. I am 38 years old. I am currently an inmate at the Metropolitan Detention Center, awaiting transfer to federal prison for tax evasion and securities fraud. He stopped. Read what he'd written. It sounded like a police report. He crumpled the paper and started again. I used to be somebody. At least I thought I was. I had a company worth $50 million. I had a penthouse with a view of the Pacific. I had a wife who loved me and friends who admired me and employees who feared me. I had everything a man could want. He paused. And I threw it all away. Not because someone took it from me. Not because the world was unfair. Because I was greedy. Because I was arrogant. Because I forgot where I came from and who helped me get there. The words were coming faster now, pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. I forgot my mother working 2 jobs to keep us fed after my father died. I forgot the teachers who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I forgot Nina, who gave me $200,000 when I had nothing, who organized my chaos and smoothed my rough edges and made me look like the man I pretended to be. He was crying now, tears rolling down his cheeks and splashing onto the paper. I forgot all of them. I stepped on all of them. I used them and discarded them and convinced myself I deserved everything I had because I was special, because I was different, because I was Marcus Jefferson, the kid from Southside Chicago who beat the odds. He set down the pen, looked at what he'd written. It wasn't a letter. It was a confession, a reckoning, a mirror held up to a face he'd been avoiding for years. Rich boy, Jerome's voice came from the bottom bunk. You okay up there? No. Marcus's voice was thick. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a long time. Jerome was quiet for a moment. You want to talk about it? Marcus laughed bitterly. You want to hear the life story of a guy who had everything and pissed it all away. I got time. Jerome shifted on his bunk. 17 more months of it, actually. So Marcus talked. He talked about his father dying on the factory floor, about his mother's quiet strength and unshakable faith, about the scholarship to Northwestern that changed his life, about the app idea that came to him at 3 a.m. and the desperation that drove him to sign papers he never read. He talked about meeting Nina at a community center where she was teaching financial literacy to single mothers, about how she saw something in him that no one else did, about how she brought him home to meet her father, and Marcus dismissed the old man as a nobody without a second thought. He talked about the first million and how it changed him, about the second million and how it changed him more, about the point where he stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as obstacles or tools or stepping stones. He talked about Jade, about the affair, about the lies he told himself to justify it. And he talked about the courtroom, about the doors exploding open, about William Chen walking in like judgment itself, about watching his entire life collapse in the span of 2 hours. Jerome listened to all of it. When Marcus finished, the cell was quiet. "Damn rich boy," Jerome finally said. "That's heavy." "Yeah." "You know what your problem is?" Marcus almost laughed. "I have a lot of problems." "Nah, you got one problem. Everything else is just symptoms." Jerome sat up on his bunk. "You never learned to be grateful." "Grateful." "Yeah, grateful. You got all this stuff, the money, the company, the wife, and instead of being thankful for it, you just wanted more. More money, more power, more women, more everything. Like there was a hole inside you that nothing could fill." Marcus was quiet. "I know that hole, rich boy. I got one too. That's why I'm in here. I had a good job, a good wife, 3 kids who thought I hung the moon. But it wasn't enough. I wanted the fast money, the easy money. So I got into some things I shouldn't have gotten into, and now my wife won't answer my calls, and my kids think their daddy is a criminal." He lay back down. "The hole doesn't go away, Marcus. You can't fill it with money or power or women. You can only fill it with one thing." "What's that?" "Purpose." Jerome's voice was matter of fact. "Something bigger than yourself. Something that makes the hole feel smaller because you're too busy doing good to notice it." Marcus stared at the ceiling. Purpose. He'd had purpose once. When he was young, when he was hungry, when he was building Jefferson Tech in his grandmother's garage with nothing but an idea and a dream. Somewhere along the way, the purpose had shifted. It stopped being about building something meaningful and started being about building something massive. About proving everyone wrong. About showing the world that Marcus Jefferson was worth something. He'd confused success with significance, and the confusion had cost him everything. The next visitor came 2 days later. Marcus walked into the visitation room expecting another lecture from William Chen, or maybe his public defender with more bad news. Instead, he found himself staring at his mother. Mama Rose Jefferson sat on the other side of the glass. She was 72 years old. Her hair was gray now, pulled back in the same simple style she'd worn his whole life. Her hands folded on the counter in front of her showed every year of hard work, the calluses, the worn knuckles, the quiet strength that had held their family together through everything. Marcus felt his legs go weak. He hadn't wanted her to see him like this, in the orange jumpsuit, behind the glass, a number instead of a name. He sat down slowly, picked up the phone. "Mama." "Baby." Her voice. That voice. The same voice that had sung him to sleep when he was small. The same voice that had told him he could be anything he wanted. The same voice that had prayed over him every night, even when he stopped believing in prayer. "I told you not to come." His voice cracked. "I didn't want you to see. Boy, you think a little glass and an ugly orange suit is going to keep me from my son." Mama Rose's eyes were fierce. "I changed your diapers. I nursed you through chickenpox. I held you when your daddy died, and you cried so hard I thought you'd break. You think I'm going to stay away now when you need me most? Marcus couldn't speak. "I've been watching the news, Marcus. I seen what they're saying about you. All these people on TV talking about Marcus Jefferson like they knew you, like they understood anything about who you are and where you came from." She leaned closer to the glass. "They don't know you. They never knew you. But I do. I know the boy who used to walk 3 miles to school because we couldn't afford bus fare. I know the boy who worked 2 jobs in high school so I wouldn't lose the house. I know the boy who stayed up all night studying because he swore he'd make something of himself." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now. "I also know the man that boy became." Mama Rose's voice softened. "I watched you change, Marcus. Year by year, phone call by phone call. You stopped coming home for Christmas, stopped calling on Sundays, started sending checks instead of letters like money could replace love." "Mama, let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I watched my son become a stranger. I read about him in magazines and watched him on TV, and barely recognized the man looking back at me. He was rich. He was successful. He was everything I'd prayed for, but he wasn't happy. I could see it in his eyes, the hunger, the emptiness, the need for more, more, more." She placed her palm against the glass. "I prayed every night, Marcus. I prayed that something would stop you, that something would wake you up before it was too late. I never imagined it would be this. I never wanted this. But maybe—" She paused. "Maybe this is God's answer. Maybe this is the only thing that could have reached you." Marcus pressed his own palm against the glass matching hers. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. I forgot everything you taught me. I forgot who I was. I forgot—" "You didn't forget, baby. You just got lost." Mama Rose's eyes were wet now, too. "We all get lost sometimes. The question is whether we find our way back." "I don't know if I can, Mama. I don't know who I am anymore." "Then this is where you figure it out." She tapped the glass gently. "This is where you strip away all the money and the power and the nonsense, and you find out what's really underneath, what's been there all along." She straightened up in her chair. "You've got time, Marcus. More time than you've ever had. Use it. Read. Write. Pray if you remember how. Find the boy who used to have dreams bigger than just getting rich. He's still in there. I know he is." Marcus wiped his face with his sleeve. "I don't deserve you, Mama. Nobody deserves their mama, baby. That's not how love works." She smiled then, the first real smile Marcus had seen in weeks. It hit him like sunlight after a long winter. "I'm gonna come see you every month, whether you like it or not, and I'm gonna keep coming until they let you out. And when they do, you're gonna come home, to the old house, to the old neighborhood, to everything you thought you were too good for." "I never thought I was too good." "Don't lie to me in God's house, Marcus Jefferson." Her voice sharpened. "We both know the truth, but that's over now. You're gonna come home and you're gonna rebuild, not a company this time, yourself, and I'm gonna be right there, same as I always was." She stood up slowly, her hand still pressed against the glass. "I love you, baby. I always have. I always will. Nothing you've done changes that. Nothing you ever could do would change that." She lowered her hand. "Now you go back to that cell and you figure out who you want to be. Because the next time I see you, I want to see my son again. My real son, not the stranger on TV." She hung up the phone. She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door she paused, looked back at him one more time. And then she was gone. Marcus sat in the visitation room for a long time after that. The guard had to come get him twice before he finally stood up. He walked back to his cell in a daze. He climbed onto his bunk. He stared at the ceiling. But this time he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what he might find. Somewhere in the wreckage of Marcus Jefferson, there was a boy who used to dream. A boy who believed in something other than money. A boy who his mother raised and his father was proud of. That boy was still in there, buried deep, waiting. And for the first time since the courtroom doors exploded open, Marcus felt something other than despair. He felt hope, faint, fragile, flickering like a candle in a storm. But there, definitely there. The transfer to Lompoc Federal Correctional Institution happened on a Tuesday. Marcus rode in the back of a prison bus for 6 hours, chained to a seat between a meth dealer from Fresno and an embezzler from San Diego. Nobody talked. The chains made enough noise for everyone. When they finally arrived, Marcus stepped off the bus into a different world. This wasn't the holding facility where he'd spent the last month. This was real prison. Long-term prison. The kind of place where years disappeared like water down a drain. Processing took half a day. They gave him a new number, a new cell, a new cellmate. His name was Raymond. 63 years old, former accountant, serving 12 years for running a Ponzi scheme that wiped out the retirement savings of 400 families. Fresh meat. Raymond barely looked up from his book when Marcus walked in. Let me guess. White collar, tax evasion, securities fraud. Welcome to the club. Raymond turned a page. Bottom bunk's yours. Don't touch my stuff. Don't talk during my reading time. And for God's sake, don't snore. Marcus settled into his new routine. Wake up at 6 a.m., breakfast at 6:30, work detail at 8, lunch at noon, more work, dinner at 5, lockdown at 9. Every day the same. Every day exactly the same. The sameness was supposed to break you. Marcus understood that now. It wasn't the bars or the guards or the violence. It was the sameness, the crushing endless repetition that turned days into weeks, into months, into years. He started writing more letters, not to anyone in particular, just to himself. Pages and pages of thoughts, memories, confessions. He filled one notebook, then another. The guards didn't care as long as he wasn't planning an escape. He wrote about his father. The smell of machine oil on his work clothes. The way he'd come home exhausted but still find energy to help Marcus with homework. The funeral where Marcus had sworn he'd never be poor again. He wrote about his mother, her prayers, her patience, her stubborn belief that her son would amount to something. The disappointment she'd never voiced, but he could see in her eyes during their monthly visits. He wrote about Nina. This was the hardest part. He wrote about the first time he saw her teaching a class of single mothers how to balance a checkbook. The way she'd smiled at him, not impressed by his ambition, just amused by his nervousness. The way she'd said yes to coffee before he even finished asking. He wrote about their wedding day. Her white dress, her father's blessing. The vows he'd meant at the time, but broken one by one over the years. He wrote about the moment he'd stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as a possession. The shift had been gradual. So gradual, he hadn't noticed it happening. But somewhere along the way, Nina had become just another asset in his portfolio. Something to maintain, something to manage, something to replace when it no longer served his needs. He wrote about Jade, the thrill of the affair, the way it made him feel powerful, desired, in control. The lies he'd told himself that he deserved it, that Nina didn't understand him, that a man of his stature needed variety. He wrote the truth that he'd been a coward, that he'd been afraid Nina would see through him, see the scared boy from South Side Chicago pretending to be a titan of industry. So he'd pushed her away before she could discover the fraud at the center of his life. Him. He was the fraud. Not just the tax evasion or the securities manipulation. Him. 3 months into his sentence, Marcus got a job in the prison library. It wasn't glamorous. Shelving books, checking returns, helping inmates fill out paperwork for their appeals. But it gave him access to something he hadn't had since arriving. Books. Real books. He started with business books, old habits. But they felt hollow now, like reading a manual for a machine he'd never operate again. Then he found the biography section. He read about Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery and educated himself to become one of the greatest orators in American history. He read about Malcolm X, who transformed himself in prison from a street hustler to a revolutionary thinker. He read about Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in a cell and emerged to lead a nation. Men who had found purpose in captivity. Men who had used their chains to forge something stronger. One afternoon, an inmate approached Marcus's desk. He was young, 22, maybe 23. Light-skinned black kid with scared eyes and shaking hands. He slid a piece of paper across the counter. "I need help with this." Marcus looked at the paper. It was a small business loan application. The kid wanted to start a landscaping company when he got out in 18 months. "You need to fill out Section 3. Marcus pointed. "Your projected expenses are way off. Lawn equipment costs more than that." The kid stared at him. "How do you know?" "I used to run a company before." "What kind of company?" "Tech. Financial services." The kid's eyes went wide. "Wait, are you Marcus Jefferson?" "The guy from the news." Marcus hesitated. He'd kept a low profile since arriving. Most inmates didn't follow financial news, but apparently some did. "Yeah, that's me." "Damn." The kid leaned on the counter. "You had $50 million and you blew it all." "Something like that." "That's crazy, man. What was it like being rich like that?" Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. "Lonely," he said finally. "It was lonely." The kid frowned. "Lonely? You had everything." "I had stuff, things, numbers in a bank account. But the more I got, the fewer people I could trust. Everyone wanted something from me. Everyone was an angle, a deal, a transaction. I couldn't tell who was real anymore." He tapped the application. "You want advice? Build something small. Build something you can touch with your own hands. Build something with people you actually know. And when you start making money, don't let it change who you are." The kid looked at him for a long moment. "That's some real talk, man." "It's the only thing I have left to give." The kid took his application and walked away. But he came back the next day, and the day after that. And before long, Marcus had a regular stream of inmates coming to him for business advice. How to fill out forms, how to write a business plan, how to avoid the mistakes that would send them right back to prison. Raymond noticed. "You're turning into some kind of prison consultant," he said one night after lockdown. "Just trying to be useful." "Useful?" Raymond snorted. "You know most of these guys are going to fail, right? Statistics say 70% of released prisoners re-offend within 5 years. Then I'll help the 30% who don't." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "You really have changed, haven't you?" Marcus stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling he'd been staring at for months. But it looked different now, less like a lid on a coffin, more like a sky waiting to open. "I'm trying." The letter arrived on a Thursday. Marcus was sorting returns in the library when the guard dropped it on his desk. "Mail for you, Jefferson." Marcus looked at the envelope. No return address, expensive paper. His name written in elegant handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, professional. "Dear Mr. Jefferson, my name is Dr. Eleanor Price. I am the director of the Second Chance Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping formerly incarcerated individuals successfully reintegrate into society. I have been following your case with great interest, not because of your crimes, but because of what has happened since. I have spoken with several inmates at Lompoc who credit you with helping them develop viable business plans for their release. I have also spoken with your mother, who remains one of the most remarkable women I have ever met. I am writing to offer you an opportunity. The Second Chance Foundation is launching a new program focused on financial literacy and entrepreneurship for recently released prisoners. We need instructors, people who understand both the business world and the challenges of incarceration. I believe you could be that person. This is not charity. This is a job offer. Contingent, of course, on your successful completion of your sentence and your demonstrated commitment to rehabilitation. I understand if you are skeptical. You have every reason to be. But I have learned that the people most equipped to help others avoid mistakes are often those who have made the biggest mistakes themselves. If you are interested, please write back. We can discuss details. Sincerely, Dr. Eleanor Price. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he read it a 4th time. A job offer. A real job offer. From someone who knew exactly who he was and what he'd done. He thought about all the inmates he'd helped over the past months. The scared kid with the landscaping dream. The middle-aged man trying to learn bookkeeping so he could work for his brother's construction company. The grandmother who wanted to start a daycare when she got out. Small dreams. Practical dreams. The kind of dreams Marcus had once dismissed as beneath him. But they weren't beneath him anymore. Nothing was beneath him anymore. He got paper and pen from his desk. He started writing. Dear Dr. Price, thank you for your letter. I am more grateful than I can express. But before I accept anything, there are some things you should know about who I really am and what I really did. He wrote for 3 hours. He told her everything, the fraud, the lies, the way he'd treated Nina, the way he'd treated everyone. He didn't make excuses. He didn't minimize. He just told the truth. And at the end he wrote, If after reading this you still believe I can help people, then yes, I accept. Not because I deserve a second chance, but because maybe helping others get their second chance is the only way I can earn mine. He sealed the letter. He mailed it the next morning. And then he waited. 6 months passed. Marcus's routine continued. Library, letters, helping inmates, monthly visits from his mother, the slow, grinding passage of days that felt like years. He'd heard nothing from Dr. Price. He told himself it didn't matter, that the work he was doing here was enough, that he didn't need external validation to know he was changing. But late at night, staring at the ceiling, he wondered if he'd been naive, if someone like Dr. Price had read his confession and decided he was too far gone, too broken, too guilty. Then one morning, the guard appeared at his cell. Jefferson, warden's office, now. Marcus's heart stopped. The warden's office meant one of 2 things. Very good news or very bad news. There was no in-between. He followed the guard through the corridors. The warden was a heavy-set man named Morrison. He'd spoken to Marcus exactly once during intake and hadn't seemed impressed. But when Marcus walked into his office, Morrison was smiling. Sit down, Jefferson. Marcus sat. You've been busy. Morrison tapped a folder on his desk. I've got letters here from 16 inmates crediting you with helping them prepare for release. I've got a report from the library supervisor saying you're the most reliable worker they've had in years. And I've got this. He pulled out a letter. Marcus recognized the expensive paper. Dr. Eleanor Price, Morrison said. She's a heavy hitter, runs one of the most respected re-entry programs in the country, and she wants you to work for her. Marcus couldn't breathe. She's requesting early release consideration, based on your behavior, your contributions to the facility, and her organization's willingness to sponsor your transition. Early release? Marcus's voice cracked. I've only served 2 years. I was sentenced to 15. 12 after the plea deal. And with good behavior credits, you're eligible for parole review at 4 years. Morrison leaned back. But Dr. Price is pushing for something called compassionate release. It's rare, usually reserved for medical cases. But she's making an argument that your skills are needed outside these walls more than inside them. He set down the letter. I'm not going to lie to you, Jefferson. I've seen a lot of guys come through here. Most of them don't change. They serve their time. They get out, they come right back. It's a revolving door. He looked at Marcus directly. But every now and then, someone surprises me. Someone actually uses this time to become a different person. And when that happens, I do everything I can to help them stay out. He stood up. The parole board meets in 3 months. I'm going to recommend you for early release. What happens after that is up to them. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. Sir, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. And when you get out, if you get out, don't waste it. Don't become another statistic. Don't make me regret going to bat for you. I won't, sir. I promise. Morrison nodded. Get back to work, Jefferson. You've got books to shelve. Marcus walked out of the warden's office in a daze. The corridors looked different now. Brighter somehow. Like someone had turned up the lights. He went back to the library. He shelved books. He helped an inmate with a food truck business plan. He ate dinner in the cafeteria. He lay on his bunk after lockdown, and for the first time in 2 years, he let himself imagine what life might look like on the other side. Not the old life. That was gone forever. A new life. A smaller life. A life built on service instead of acquisition. A life that might actually mean something. The parole hearing was scheduled for March 15th. Marcus prepared for it like he'd once prepared for investor pitches. He wrote out his statement. He practiced it in front of Raymond. He gathered letters of support from inmates he'd helped, from Dr. Price, from his mother. The night before the hearing, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his bunk running through scenarios. What if they said no? What if 2 years wasn't enough? What if the board looked at his crimes and decided he deserved every day of his 12-year sentence? You're thinking too loud, Raymond grumbled from the bottom bunk. I can hear it. Sorry, Raymond sighed. You know what your problem is. I have a lot of problems. You're still trying to control the outcome. Same thing that got you in here in the first place. Marcus was quiet. You did the work, Marcus. You changed. Whatever happens tomorrow, that's still true. The board can't take that away from you. Only you can take that away from you. Raymond shifted on his bunk. Now go to sleep. You're going to need your energy for whatever comes next. Marcus closed his eyes. He didn't sleep, but he stopped trying to control the outcome. The parole board consisted of 3 people, 2 men and a woman. They sat behind a long table with folders open in front of them. Marcus's entire life reduced to paper and ink. He sat alone at a smaller table facing them. The woman spoke first. Mr. Jefferson, you've been incarcerated for 26 months. You were originally sentenced to 12 years for tax evasion and securities fraud. Tell us why you believe you deserve early release. Marcus had practiced this speech 100 times, but when he opened his mouth, different words came out. I don't. The board members exchanged glances. Excuse me. I don't deserve early release. I deserve every day of my sentence. What I did wasn't just illegal, it was cruel. I hurt people who trusted me. I betrayed a woman who loved me. I built a fortune on lies and convinced myself I was entitled to it because I'd grown up poor. He took a breath. I'm not here because I deserve anything. I'm here because I believe I can do more good outside these walls than inside them. I've spent the last 2 years helping other inmates prepare for their release, teaching them financial literacy, helping them build business plans, showing them that there's a path forward that doesn't lead right back to prison. He looked at each board member in turn. Dr. Eleanor Price has offered me a job doing the same thing on a larger scale, helping hundreds of formerly incarcerated people find legitimate paths to success. That's what I want to do with whatever time I have left. Not because it erases what I did. Nothing erases that. But because it might mean something. It might help someone avoid the mistakes I made. He stopped. That's all I have to say. The room was silent. The woman wrote something in her folder. One of the men cleared his throat. Mr. Jefferson, we've reviewed the letters of support. We've reviewed the warden's recommendation. We've reviewed your conduct record, which is exemplary. He paused. We've also reviewed the victim impact statements, including one from your ex-wife, Nina Chen. Marcus felt his heart stop. Nina had submitted a statement. Would you like to hear what she wrote? Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak. The man pulled out a piece of paper. She writes, "Marcus Jefferson was my husband for 7 years. During that time he hurt me in ways that I am still processing. He lied to me. He cheated on me. He tried to destroy my reputation to protect his own interests. I have every reason to want him to serve his full sentence." Marcus closed his eyes. "But," the man continued, "I have also watched him from a distance over the past 2 years. I have read the letters from inmates he has helped. I have spoken with Dr. Price about her program. And I have come to believe that Marcus Jefferson is not the same man who walked into that courtroom." Marcus opened his eyes. "I am not ready to forgive him. I may never be ready. But I believe in rehabilitation. I believe people can change. And I believe that keeping Marcus in prison benefits no one, not him, not society, and not the people he could be helping. For these reasons, I do not oppose his early release." The man set down the paper. Marcus was crying. He didn't try to hide it. Nina. After everything he'd done, after all the pain he'd caused, she'd given him this gift. Not forgiveness. Something harder. Something more generous. Permission to try again. The board conferred quietly among themselves. The woman looked up. "Mr. Jefferson, this board has decided to grant your request for early release effective 30 days from today. You will be required to report to your parole officer weekly. You will be prohibited from traveling outside the state without permission. And you will be required to maintain employment with the Second Chance Foundation for a minimum of 2 years." She paused. "Do you understand and accept these conditions?" "Yes." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I accept." "Then this hearing is concluded. Good luck, Mr. Jefferson. Don't make us regret this." The gavel came down, and just like that, Marcus Jefferson's second chance began. The bus dropped Marcus off at the corner of 47th and King Drive on a Tuesday morning in April. He stood on the sidewalk with a plastic bag containing everything he owned: 2 changes of clothes, a notebook filled with writing, a photograph of his mother, and a letter from Dr. Eleanor Price with an address in Oakland and a start date circled in red. He was home, South Side Chicago. The neighborhood looked smaller than he remembered. The houses more worn, the streets more tired. But the smell was the same: fried chicken from the corner store, exhaust from the buses, cut grass from the park where he used to play basketball until the streetlights came on. He walked 3 blocks to his mother's house. His feet knew the way. They'd walked this path 1,000 times. To school, to work, to the bus stop that took him to Northwestern, where everything changed. The house was exactly as he remembered: small, white, a porch with 2 rocking chairs and a pot of geraniums that his mother had been growing since before he was born. He climbed the steps. He knocked on the door. Footsteps inside, slow, careful, the shuffle of a woman who'd spent 72 years carrying the weight of a hard life. The door opened. Mama Rose stood there in her Sunday dress even though it was Tuesday. Her eyes were wet before she even saw his face. "Baby." "Mama." She pulled him into her arms. Marcus bent down to hug her. She was smaller than he remembered, frailer. 2.5 years had taken something from her, but her grip was still strong. Her love was still fierce. "You're home." She was crying now. "You're finally home." "I'm home, Mama." They stood like that for a long time. Mother and son, holding each other on the porch where Marcus had learned to walk, where his father had taught him to tie his shoes, where his whole life had started before he'd thrown it all away. "Come inside." Mama Rose finally pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I made breakfast, your favorite. Grits and eggs and bacon, the good kind from the butcher on 51st. Mama, you didn't have to." "Boy, don't tell me what I have to do." She was already pulling him through the door. "I've been waiting 2 years to feed my son a decent meal. You're going to sit down and eat every bite." Marcus sat. He ate. And for the first time in 2.5 years, he tasted something other than survival. He tasted home. The first week was strange. Marcus slept in his childhood bedroom. The same twin bed. The same posters on the wall, Michael Jordan, Malcolm X, a faded print of the Chicago skyline. His mother had kept everything exactly as it was, a museum of the boy he used to be. He reported to his parole officer on Wednesday, a tired man named Gerald, who'd clearly seen too many guys come through his office and go right back to prison. "You got a job lined up?" Gerald asked, flipping through Marcus's file. "Yes, sir. Second Chance Foundation. I start Monday." "In Oakland?" "Yes, sir." Gerald looked up. "That's a long way from home." "I know, but Dr. Price's program is headquartered there. She wants me on site for training before they send me to the Chicago office." Gerald studied him for a long moment. "I've seen your file, Jefferson. $50 million company, tax fraud, securities manipulation. You were a big shot." "I was a criminal." "Yeah." Gerald nodded slowly. "You were. But you know what's interesting? Most white-collar guys who come through here, they're still making excuses, still talking about how they were set up, how the system was unfair, how they didn't really do anything wrong." He leaned back in his chair. "You're different. Every letter in your file, every report from Lompoc, everyone says the same thing. Marcus Jefferson takes responsibility. Marcus Jefferson doesn't make excuses. Marcus Jefferson actually changed." "I'm trying, sir." "Don't try, do." Gerald stamped something in the file. "I'm approving your transfer to California. Don't make me regret it." "I won't." Marcus meant it. He flew to Oakland on a Saturday. The flight was strange. First time on a plane in 2.5 years. Last time he'd flown, it was first class to Cabo with champagne, and Jade waiting at the other end. Now he was in a middle seat in economy, wedged between a sleeping businessman and a teenager watching videos on her phone. It felt right somehow. Normal. Human. Dr. Eleanor Price met him at the airport. She was smaller than he'd imagined. 60 years old with silver hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a simple blue dress and practical shoes. Nothing about her suggested wealth or power. But when she shook his hand, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. Real respect. The kind that was earned, not bought. "Mr. Jefferson." Her voice was warm but businesslike. "Welcome to Oakland." "Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Price. I still don't understand why you took a chance on me." "Because I've been doing this work for 30 years, and I've learned that the most powerful teachers are the ones who've made the biggest mistakes." She started walking toward the exit. "You're not here to lecture people about financial literacy from a textbook. You're here to show them what happens when you lose your way and how to find it again." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am, I can." "Good. Let's get to work." The Second Chance Foundation operated out of a converted warehouse in East Oakland. It wasn't fancy. Folding tables, plastic chairs, whiteboards covered in handwritten schedules. But it was alive, buzzing with energy, filled with people who'd been through hell and were clawing their way back. Dr. Price introduced Marcus to the team. Caseworkers, counselors, job placement specialists, former inmates who'd graduated from the program and stayed on to help others. They looked at Marcus with curiosity. Most of them had heard his story. The tech mogul who lost everything. The cautionary tale splashed across every news channel. Some of them looked skeptical. Some of them looked hopeful. All of them were watching to see what he'd do next. His first class was Monday morning. 12 men and women sat in folding chairs looking at him with the same wary expressions he'd seen in Lompoc. They'd been promised help before. They'd been let down before. They weren't going to trust some stranger just because he had a job title. Marcus stood at the front of the room. He'd prepared a lesson plan, financial literacy basics, budgeting, credit scores, all the standard material. He threw it away. "My name is Marcus Jefferson," he said. 3 years ago, I was worth $50 million. I had a penthouse in Pacific Palisades, a corner office in Century City, and a company with my name on the building. He paused. I also had a wife who loved me, a mother who believed in me, employees who trusted me. And I betrayed every single one of them. I cheated on my wife. I stole from my company. I lied to the government. And when I got caught, I tried to destroy the woman who'd spent 7 years building me up. The room was silent. I'm not here to tell you how to avoid my mistakes. You've all made your own mistakes. That's why you're here. I'm here to tell you that the mistakes don't have to define you. That the worst thing you ever did doesn't have to be the last thing you ever do. He looked at each face in turn. I'm here because I want to help. Not because I'm better than you. Because I'm exactly like you. I'm just further down the road. A woman in the back raised her hand. What happened to your wife? Marcus swallowed hard. She took over my company, changed the name, made it better than I ever could. Last I heard, she's engaged to someone else, an architect. Good man, apparently. That hurt. Every day. Marcus's voice was steady. But she deserved to move on. She deserved happiness. I was never going to give her that. The best thing I ever did for her was get out of her way. The woman nodded slowly. All right, she said. I'm listening. Marcus taught. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. He taught budgeting. He taught credit repair. He taught how to write a business plan and pitch to investors and spot the warning signs of a scam. But mostly he listened. He listened to Marcus Williams, 24, who'd done 3 years for armed robbery and wanted to start a barber shop. He helped Marcus Williams write a business plan, find a mentor, apply for a small business loan. He listened to Teresa Johnson, 41, who'd lost custody of her kids during her addiction and was fighting to get them back. He helped Teresa Johnson navigate the legal system, find stable housing, build a case for reunification. He listened to Raymond Chen, 58, no relation to Nina, who'd embezzled from his employer and lost everything. He helped Raymond Chen find work as a bookkeeper for a nonprofit that believed in second chances. Each person had a story. Each story had pain. And each story had the seed of something new waiting to grow. Dr. Price watched him work. After 6 months, she called him into her office. You're good at this, she said. Better than I expected. Thank you. I want to expand the program to Chicago, open a new office, serve the South Side and the West Side communities that need this most. She leaned forward. I want you to run it. Marcus stared at her. Me. You know those neighborhoods. You came from there. You understand what these people are facing in a way that someone like me never could. She slid a folder across the desk. It's a big job. Director of Midwest Operations. You'd be responsible for fundraising, programming staff, partnerships, everything. Marcus opened the folder. Salary, benefits, responsibilities. It was real. A real job. A real career. A real chance to make a difference in the place he'd once been so desperate to escape. Dr. Price? I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then go build something meaningful. Marcus closed the folder. Yes. The Chicago office opened 14 months after Marcus's release. Mama Rose cut the ribbon. She stood on the sidewalk at 63rd and Cottage Grove, holding a pair of oversized scissors, surrounded by community leaders and local reporters and former inmates who'd traveled from Oakland just to be there. My son, she said into the microphone, her voice cracking with emotion. My son went away for a while. He made mistakes, big mistakes, but he came back, and he came back different. He came back ready to help. She turned to Marcus. I always knew you were meant for something, baby. I just didn't know it would take losing everything to find out what it was. She cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Marcus hugged his mother, and for a moment he let himself feel proud. Not of what he'd been, of what he was becoming. The first year was hard. Funding was tight. Staff was stretched thin. The community was skeptical. They'd seen organizations come and go making promises they couldn't keep. Why should this one be any different? Marcus worked 18-hour days. He knocked on doors. He spoke at churches and community centers and high school assemblies. He told his story over and over, never hiding from the ugly parts, never pretending to be anything other than what he was. A man who'd hit rock bottom. A man who was trying to climb back up. A man who wanted to bring others with him. Slowly the program grew. 50 graduates the first year, 120 the second, partnerships with local businesses, job placement rates that beat the national average, success stories that made the local news. Marcus Williams opened his barbershop on 79th Street. He hired 3 other program graduates. He put a sign in his window, "Second chances happen here." Teresa Johnson got her kids back. She sent Marcus a photograph of their first Christmas together in 4 years. She was crying in the picture. Happy tears. Raymond Chen became the CFO of a community development corporation. He helped secure funding for affordable housing in neighborhoods that banks had written off decades ago. Each success felt like a small redemption. Not for Marcus's crimes. Nothing could redeem those. But for his life. For the years he had left. For the chance to be something other than a cautionary tale. 3 years after his release, Marcus got a phone call. He was at his desk reviewing grant applications when his assistant knocked on the door. "Marcus, there's someone here to see you." "I don't have any appointments this afternoon." "She doesn't have an appointment. She says her name is Nina Chen." Marcus's heart stopped. "Send her in." The door opened. Nina walked in. She looked different. Older, but not worn refined. Her hair was shorter now, styled professionally. She wore a tailored blazer and simple jewelry. She carried herself with a confidence that hadn't been there before. The confidence of a woman who'd rebuilt herself from the ashes. "Hello, Marcus." "Nina." They stood there for a long moment. 2 people who'd once shared a life, a home, a future. 2 people who'd torn each other apart and somehow survived. "Can I sit?" "Of course." She sat in the chair across from his desk. The same kind of folding chair he'd sat in during his first class at Second Chance. Simple, practical, a long way from the leather furniture in his old office. "I've been following your work," Nina said. "The Chicago program, the graduation rates, the success stories. Thank you." "I didn't come here to thank you." She paused. "I came here to understand." "Understand what?" "How you became this person." She gestured at the office, the plaques on the wall, the photographs with program graduates. "The man I married would never have done this. The man I divorced was incapable of caring about anyone but himself." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "The man you married was scared," he said finally. "Scared of being poor again, scared of being nothing again." He built walls around himself, money, power, status, because he thought those walls would keep him safe. He looked at her directly. They didn't. They just kept everyone else out, including you. Nina's eyes glistened. "Prison broke those walls down," Marcus continued. "Not because of the punishment, because of the time, the silence, the chance to actually look at who I'd become. And when I looked, I didn't recognize myself. I didn't like what I saw." He leaned forward. "You asked how I became this person. I didn't become anything. I just stopped pretending to be something I wasn't. I stopped performing success and started actually trying to be useful, to matter, to help." Nina wiped her eyes. "I read your parole statement," she said. "The one you gave to the board, about not deserving early release, about wanting to help others avoid your mistakes. I meant every word." "I know." She took a breath. "That's why I submitted my letter. That's why I didn't oppose your release." Marcus felt tears burning in his own eyes. "I never thanked you for that. I didn't do it for you." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I did it because I believed it was right. Because keeping you locked up served no one. Because I wanted to believe that people could change. She stood up. I'm engaged now, to David, the architect. I heard. I'm happy for you. Are you? Yes. Marcus meant it. You deserve someone who sees you, someone who puts you first. I was never that person. I'm glad you found him. Nina walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. I forgive you, Marcus. The words hit him like a physical blow. What? I forgive you. She turned to face him. Not for your sake, for mine. I've been carrying this weight for 4 years. The anger, the betrayal, the questions about what I could have done differently. And I realized that the weight was crushing me, keeping me stuck in the past. She straightened her shoulders. So I'm letting it go. I forgive you for the lies, for the cheating, for trying to destroy me in that courtroom. I forgive you because I need to move forward, because holding on to the hate was turning me into someone I didn't want to be. Marcus couldn't speak. I don't want to be friends, Nina continued. I don't want to stay in touch. After today, I probably won't see you again. But I wanted you to know that I don't hate you anymore. I hope you find peace, Marcus. The same peace I'm finally starting to find. She opened the door. Goodbye. Goodbye, Nina. She walked out. The door closed behind her. Marcus sat alone in his office. He cried. Not from sadness, not from relief, from something he hadn't felt in years. Grace. The phone call came on a Friday night. Marcus was at his mother's house for dinner. They did this every week now. Sunday dinners, Friday suppers, holidays, birthdays, making up for lost time. His phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Hello, Mr. Jefferson. This is Richard Morrison. We met briefly a few years ago. Richard Morrison, the board member who'd resigned the day of Marcus's arrest, the golf buddy who'd abandoned ship along with everyone else. I remember you, Richard. I imagine you do. Morrison's voice was nervous. Look, I know I don't have any right to call you, after what happened, how I acted, but I'm in a situation, and someone suggested you might be able to help. What kind of situation? My son, Marcus Jr. He's 26. He got into some trouble. Fraud charges. He's looking at 3 to 5 years. Marcus was silent. I know how it sounds, Morrison continued. I abandoned you when things got hard, and now I'm calling because I need something. You have every right to tell me to go to hell. What do you want from me? He's going to Lompoc, same place you were. I heard you help people, that you run some kind of program for guys getting out of prison. I was hoping, maybe you could talk to him, give him some advice, help him not waste the time the way I wasted mine. Marcus thought about karma, about justice, about the satisfaction of telling Richard Morrison to solve his own problems the way Marcus had to solve his. But that wasn't who he was anymore. Send me his information, Marcus said. I'll reach out. You will? Morrison sounded shocked. Everyone deserves a second chance, Richard. Even the sons of men who didn't give me one. He hung up. Mama Rose looked at him from across the dinner table. Who was that? Someone asking for help. And you're going to help them? Yes, Mama. She smiled. That's my boy. 5 years after his release, Marcus Jefferson stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. The Senate hearing room was packed. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Politicians shifted in their leather chairs preparing to question the witness. Mr. Jefferson. Senator Williams, the committee chair, leaned into his microphone. You've been invited to testify on criminal justice reform, specifically on the question of whether rehabilitation programs reduce recidivism. Can you share your perspective? Marcus looked out at the room. He thought about the scared kid from Southside Chicago. He thought about the arrogant CEO in the Italian suit. He thought about the broken man in the orange jumpsuit. He thought about every person he'd helped over the past 5 years, every success story, every second chance. Senator, I can tell you from personal experience that rehabilitation works, not because it's easy, not because everyone succeeds, but because human beings have an incredible capacity to change when given the opportunity and the support to do so. He leaned forward. I was a criminal. I stole. I lied. I hurt people who trusted me. And when I got caught, I deserved every day of my sentence. But during that sentence, something happened. I met people who believed I could be better, who gave me tools to become better, who showed me that my worst moment didn't have to be my last moment. He looked at each senator in turn. The Second Chance Foundation has served over 2,000 formerly incarcerated individuals in the past 4 years. Our recidivism rate is 11% compared to a national average of 44%. We don't just teach skills, we rebuild identities. We show people that they are more than their mistakes. Senator Williams nodded slowly. What would you say to critics who argue that criminals don't deserve second chances, that resources should go to victims, not perpetrators? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I would say that I understand that perspective. I was a perpetrator. I caused real harm to real people, including a woman who loved me and trusted me, and deserved far better than what I gave her. He paused. But I would also say that punishment without rehabilitation creates a cycle. People go to prison. They learn nothing. They come out worse than they went in. They reoffend. They go back. The cycle continues, and society pays the price in money, in safety, in broken families, and broken communities. He straightened in his chair. Second chances aren't about forgetting what someone did. They're about believing that people can grow, that the person who committed the crime isn't necessarily the person who will live the rest of their life. That redemption is possible, not guaranteed, but possible, if we're willing to invest in it. The room was silent. Senator Williams made a note. Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Your testimony has been illuminating. Marcus flew back to Chicago that night. His mother was waiting at the airport. She'd insisted on coming even though it was late, even though her knees weren't what they used to be. I saw you on TV. She hugged him tight. You did good, baby. Your father would have been proud. Marcus held her close. I hope so, Mama. I hope so. The anniversary celebration happened 6 years after the Chicago office opened. 6 years. Thousands of graduates. Hundreds of businesses started. Countless lives rebuilt. Marcus stood at the back of the room watching. Former inmates mingled with business leaders and politicians and community activists. Marcus Williams, the barber, was there with his wife and 2 kids. Teresa Johnson was there with her children, now teenagers. Raymond Chen was there with his staff from the Community Development Corporation. Dr. Price found Marcus in the corner. You should be up front, she said. This is your achievement. It's everyone's achievement. Humble doesn't suit you, Marcus, she smiled, but it looks good on you anyway. She handed him a glass of sparkling cider. I'm retiring next year, she said. The board has asked me to recommend my successor. Marcus looked at her. I recommended you. Eleanor. You've earned it. The Chicago program is the most successful in our network. The testimony in Washington opened doors we've been knocking on for years. You've become the face of second chances in this country. She raised her glass. To the man who lost everything and found something better. Marcus raised his glass. To second chances. They drank. The party continued around them. Laughter and music and the sound of people who'd been written off by society, proving that the story wasn't over. Marcus Jefferson stood in the middle of it all. Not the CEO with the $50 million company. Not the inmate with the 12-year sentence. Just a man who'd made terrible mistakes and spent every day since trying to be worthy of the grace he'd been given. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It was better. And that he realized was the real lesson. The life you plan isn't always the life you need. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what actually matters. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the first day of a better one. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you were afraid to become is exactly the person you were meant to be. Marcus Jefferson lost his fortune, his freedom, and his wife. He found his purpose, his peace, and his soul. And in the end, that trade was worth everything. So the next time you see someone celebrating too early, remember this story. Remember that pride comes before the fall. Remember that the quiet ones are often the strongest. And remember that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back up. If you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to face the truth, if you're willing to become someone worth being. That's not just Marcus Jefferson's story, that's the human story. And it never really ends. It just keeps giving us chances to begin again.